Okay, welcome everybody. Craig Anthony Ferreira here again, and I'm going to be telling you all about the submarine, the largest great white shark I've ever seen by far, and I've seen a lot of big great white sharks. Now, before we even get into it, I'm just going to tell you that this great white shark, the submarine, was approximately 23, 24 feet long, which is about 7 meters long for people that don't live in the United States and actually do mathematics. But in any case, the submarine was a giant among giants. I've seen 6-meter great white sharks, I've seen 6.5-meter great white sharks, I've seen 5-meter great white sharks, 5.5, but they were all dwarfed compared to the submarine. Now I want to go back a little bit because my interest in great white sharks came from a very young age. My father used to be a shark fisherman, was shark sports fisherman, monster shark fisherman. We lived in Durban up on the east coast, northeast coast of South Africa, and he would catch bull sharks and tiger sharks and black tips and duskies. He'd let them go, he'd release them, but quite a number of these animals would actually end up in the Durban aquarium. And my mom used to take me down. I was only 6, 7 years old. Take me down to the aquarium and actually show me the sharks my father had caught. So this instilled a great interest in me and sharks. That was the galvanizing factor of my lifelong obsession with sharks. Then we moved down from Durban to Cape Town, and we took up residence in a place called Somerset West, which overlooks False Bay. And False Bay, I already knew that False Bay was famous for great white sharks, but I didn't know much about it. And I'd heard these, I was 12 years old at this time, and I'd heard these little mutterings about this animal called the submarine. But nobody could tell you exactly what it was. Some people said it was 40 feet long, some people said it was 30 feet long. There were stories that it was so big that military ships used to pick it up on sonar. The stories abounded. It used to attack boats apparently, and fishermen were scared of it. All sorts of crazy stories. But anyway, one day my dad and I went to a guy's old barn. It was called Arts Mart, and it was in the Strand. It lay 2 streets from the beach. It was a beautiful Saturday morning, and my dad and I went down to Arts Mart because we heard that he had lots of second-hand fishing equipment, and he was a real, what do you call it, expert at where the fish were in the False Bay area. And at that time, False Bay used to teem with fish. You used to get all sorts of different fish. Anyway, we go down to Arts Mart, and we arrive there, and it's an old kind of a wreck of a building, and it's got these big wooden doors that are sprawled out onto the sidewalk, kind of yawning onto the sidewalk. And we walk into Arts Mart. And my dad was a big guy. My dad was 6 foot tall, he weighed 250 pounds. He had this presence about him. So we walk in there, and after a couple of shouts of hello, because we couldn't see anybody, there was nobody in the place. And just to describe this place to you, Arts Mart was a dump. I mean, this place there was tables and chairs and desks and old vacuum cleaners, and he had pots and pans and bolts and nuts and all sorts of shit that he sold in this place. But it looked like a dump truck had actually just reversed in and just tipped it all over, and that was it. That was Arts Mart. So eventually, after shouting hello a couple of times, this big bear of a man comes walking from the back of the barn, and he says, yeah, wake up the goddamn dead, will you? And he comes over, and he walks up to my dad, and he stares at my dad in the face, because he's kind of my dad's size, and a bit older. And it's just this Art has got this rugged face that's got a lot of mileage on it, and it's just surrounded by this big mop of hair and beard. And so anyway, my dad and Art introduced themselves to each other, and he looks at me and he says, "And what's your name, young man?" He shakes my hand. I tell him my name's Craig. And he says, "So what can I do you for?" So my dad says, "I hear that you're the guy, Arthur, to talk about fishing and False Bay," because my dad had just bought a 20-foot ski boat, a fishing boat. Quiet. So, nice language. So in any case, Art goes and he's got his big entrance, and he takes a chain with closed on it, and he stretches the chain across the entrance, and he hooks it onto the wall. Shop is closed. And so my dad says to him, listen, Art, I don't need you to close your shop. I just want to ask you a bit about fishing and whatnot in False Bay. I just bought the ski boat. It's a 20-foot rob craft. So Art says, hey, when it comes to fishing and fucking, the shop is closed. So anyway, we go and we sit down at his desk, and he says to my dad, you want a rum? My dad says, no thanks, it's a bit early in the morning. He says, okay. I'm also trying to give it up kind of thing. So he makes us each a cup of coffee, and we sit down there, and they start talking fishing. So I'm sitting there 12 years old, and there's these two big bear of a men talking about fishing and sharks and everything, and I'm so excited. And eventually I get the opportunity to say, Uncle Arthur, have you ever heard of the submarine? And he looks at me and says, sure, I've heard of the submarine. And I'm my ass beating, I'm so excited. So I say to him, have you ever seen the submarine? So Arthur says, yes, I've seen the submarine one time. He says, I was out with a cat called Tuckies. He called people cats. You know, a guy that thought it was a big deal was a cat. So he says, I was out fishing with a guy called Tuckies one day, and we hooked the submarine. We hooked the submarine about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and 9 o'clock that night I cut his line, because I just had enough of fighting this animal. And he says, since then, Tuckies and I haven't spoken again. So, and then he said, and there's a couple of other cats as well. He says there's Stumbo Mason. He's also hooked the submarine. He's tried to catch it. He says one of the teachers from the school up the road, Hottentots Holland High, Donnie Skuman, he tried to catch the submarine. He ended up with a hole in his boat. So he says, I've seen it. So I say to him, but Uncle Art, how big is this? How big was the shark? Or how big is the submarine? And he says, my boy, that shark is probably around 21 feet long. So I said, yeah, but I heard that it's big. I heard that it's 25 feet or 30 feet or 40 feet. So he said, he says, you'll hear all sorts of stories about the submarine. He says, Tuckies, he estimated the shark to be about 24, 25 feet. Stumbo says it's around 24 feet, 23 feet. Donnie says it's about 24, 25 feet. So, you know, but fishermen, he says, fishermen all exaggerate, so you got to take off a couple of feet. But I think it was about 21 feet. So anyway, he says, but it's the biggest great white shark I've ever seen out there in False Bay. So I'm all excited. And yeah, so we carry on chatting. My dad and Art carry on chatting about the shark, the submarine. And my mind is going crazy because now I want to see this animal. So, but before we see this animal, I'll just tell you a little bit of a story before this particular video ends. One day, now Uncle Arthur had actually become a regular on our boat. And he used to go fishing with us, and him and my dad forged a good friendship right from the start. So one day we get down to the harbor very early in the morning, the sun hasn't even come over the mountains, and my dad sends me over to the little Gordons Bay Cafe where we launch our boat to get some coffee. So I walk into the Gordons Bay Cafe and I order 3 or 4 cups of coffee. It was myself, my dad, Uncle Arthur, and one of the people that worked for my dad, Trevor Grant, on the boat. And while I'm waiting for them to do the coffee, I walk into the little curio shop next door to the coffee shop. And as I walk in there, there's this dried out head of a great white shark. And it's probably from a 2.5, 3 meter great white shark, probably smaller than 3 meters. And it's got this mouth wide open like that, and the skin's all crinkled. But it's the most beautiful, frightening thing I've ever seen. I just can't take my eyes off this thing. And I remember running my fingers across the teeth of this animal, and they were razor sharp. So I run outside, and I tell my dad, Dad, come have a look at this, come have a look at this. So he comes inside, and there's this shark head there, this great white shark's head. So I say to him, can you buy it for me, please? So he says, there's no chance I'm buying that thing. I buy that thing, you bring that smelly head back home, your mother will divorce me. So anyway, I tried my luck, and he said no. And then I started having this obsession about catching a great white shark. And a couple of weeks later, after nagging the hell out of my father, he eventually said to me, okay, there, take that tuna fishing rod, take that reel, catch a goddamn great white shark the next time we go fishing. And the next weekend we went out fishing, I stuck a line in the water, and I became the youngest person in the world to catch a great white shark at the age of 12. And it wasn't a big animal, it was probably 2.5 meters long, but to me it was a monster. And that was my real initiation. That was the first live great white shark I ever saw. So that's the end of this part of the story, and it'll continue into where we first encountered the great white shark and so on and so forth. And it gets very exciting. So thank you, and hang in there for the next one.